I got up this morning and was just amazed that anybody showed up this early. Goodness, you are dedicated to our state. You are dedicated to important political moments and conversations, and I welcome you to Lipscomb University. A number of years ago, when we established our Institute for Civic Leadership and our Institute for Law, Justice, and Society and several others, the whole essence of that was to say, can a university do something that leaps out of the academic world into the community? And those institutes have been doing that now for almost 8 years, and I think have at least confirmed for me the value of doing that and the importance of those of us who have the wonderful privilege of this environment being much, much more engaged in the larger environment. But occasionally those institutes also turn and say, let's bring the community here. And so that's what's happened this morning, and we thank you as members of our community and concerned and interested people for getting up early and coming to hear this dialogue about this important amendment that's on our ballot. It's my privilege to introduce to you Keel Hunt. Keel is the moderator of this event this morning. He, as you know, has for many, many years had the strategy group here in Nashville. I got to know Keel a number of years ago at Nashville's Agenda and find that he is one of many, many people in this city that very quietly and very deliberately continue to make us all better. And on occasion, we've even employed him here at the university to help us navigate this or that in the city. And in each of those cases, I think so far, he got what we needed. So that's a wonderful, wonderful recommendation. And he did that with a sense of collaboration. He did that with a sense of cooperation, and did that in a way that we would always be proud of the person representing us. And so he's going to introduce our two very, very special guests and conduct the conversation this morning. But let me just indicate how pleased we are that you are here and how important it is that we are in conversation about these issues. Lastly, I would say that I am a lawyer. And most people don't think about that because I became a college president. But deep in my DNA is that. And for 19 years, I taught law. And when you teach law, all you do is read the opinions of judges, right? Day after day after day. Students assemble, and all of a sudden, we open to this or that case. And when we open to this or that case, there's someone else's opinion that we turn and scrutinize and analyze and learn from so that group of folks in front of us learn to think a particular way. So the importance of this particular amendment and how those of us in this community select those who will be writing those opinions, those who will be setting down that precedent, that's extraordinarily important as well. So would you please welcome Keel Hunt as he leads us into this conversation.
Thank you, President Lowry. You'll see I brought my Lipscomb purple clipboard to use this morning. Thank you very much, and I'll add my welcome to you all to this program, and also to the first day of early voting. There have been two previous forums like this involving Governor Haslam and Governor Bredesen, one in Knoxville and one in Memphis, but this is the first one. This is the one that occurs on the first day of early voting in our state, so it's a very timely program, and we welcome you all here. Now, I'm the moderator, and you can tell that in three ways. One is Dr. Lowry just said that. Another way is that I'm sitting in the middle, and so as necessary, we'll use the sharp elbows. But the third way, and most clear probably, is I'm wearing this bow tie. I thought I would wear this to indicate to you that I'm not running for any office. You'll see very few elected officials wearing bow ties. So we're going to have fun here this morning. Let me just mention one logistical part of our plan. We want to have a discussion that will proceed in response to my questions at the outset, but then, and most importantly, to your questions. And you'll see at your table some cards for you to write questions down. And I hope even as you're paying attention to what these gentlemen are saying at the outset, please proceed. Can you hear me now? To write down your questions that are on your heart about this issue, Amendment 2 to our Tennessee Constitution. And then we will collect those, and Chelsea in the back, you'll raise your hand, and we'll then hand those to me in due course, and we'll proceed to put those questions to these gentlemen to my left and right. So let me say, by way of introduction, now this is a pretty classic case of two fellows who need no introduction, as they say. They actually have, though having been nominated and elected from different parties, Phil Bredesen and Bill Haslam actually have a good bit in common. They have both been successful in business careers prior to their political careers. Each has been mayor of his city. Governor Haslam having been mayor of Knoxville, Governor Bredesen was mayor of Nashville. Before becoming governor, these are quite accomplished gentlemen. And they both have a position in which they become quite proactive on this issue, Amendment 2 to our Constitution. Shall our Tennessee Constitution, through the amendment process, be brought into line with our current practice, which has actually been our practice in Tennessee for some 40 years, with respect to our appellate court, the judges of our state appellate courts, appeals courts, state Supreme Court. And so with that, I think what we might do best, and we want to respect everybody's schedules. This is a day. We do hope everybody will consider voting starting today. Let me start with a question to Governor Haslam. There's been a lot of discussion about this issue. I read in a letter to the editor just this morning, the word confusing was used, that this is a confusing subject for some people. Would you mind just clarifying what this is about and why you think it's important?
I'll do my best. And by the way, thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Lipscomb for hosting us. I live around the corner these days, and Lipscomb is truly a community university in the best sense. I'm never here when there's not some event going on, and I think that's kind of represents the best of what a university should be, so thank you very much. Amendment 2 is an attempt to take and provide some certainty around an issue that has caused several lawsuits and a lot of confusion over the last several years in Tennessee, and that is, how do we select our appellate level judges? Those are the 29 judges above the trial court level that we have for the last 40 years in Tennessee, been selecting by a process where the governor made the appointment prior to a year ago from a list of 3 nominees given to the governor from a review committee, and the governor made that appointment. The issue has been this: the Tennessee state constitution says the people of the state shall elect. That has been challenged in court several times about whether what we do or not meets the Constitution's definition. And then I think 3 different Supreme Courts have said it does, because every 8 years there's a retention election where the people get to vote yes or no on whether to retain those judges. But the uncertainty has meant, like I said, several lawsuits. It has meant a lot of confusion, and I think it's led to, particularly in the legislature, a lot of conversation about whether what we're doing or not fits the definition and whether that should be changed. It's my view that putting this on the ballot will hopefully settle that issue, so the people will say, yes, we're going to amend the Constitution to specifically say what the process will be in terms of our appellate level judges. So the difference in this process from what we did before is we're adding a step to it. So the governor will select a nominee. It will then be approved by the legislature. They'll have 60 days to decide on that. And then every 8 years, that nominee will run in a retention election. So that's, I guess, the clearest, or hopefully it's the clearest I can do about what we're actually voting on.
Yes, sir. Governor Bredesen, would you?
Yeah, if I might, that was a great description. And just at the beginning, I want to add my own thanks to Lipscomb. Everything that the governor said is exactly true. I've been involved over the years with the Andrews Institute down the hall here, I guess, and so on. But told the president as we were standing waiting to come up here that just Lipscomb does a wonderful job of reaching out into the community and really being a part of the community, and I really appreciate that. You know, after you've been governor and then you've retired from the job, you start thinking probably more about just less about the individual issues and the ideologies and more about just how do you make government work. And one of the things that Tennessee has always had as a reputation for having a state government that may argue about individual issues, but it works, and people are able to move forward and get things done. I also, in that time, came to have an appreciation. I'm not a lawyer, but an appreciation for just how important judges are in the system of government we have, just how powerful they are, and how important it was and what an obligation it was to make good selections on that. Now, just to talk a little bit, what's really going on here, I think, is this is not I think this is a little more than just simply pinning down in the Constitution something which is already the practice. There is a lot of push from different directions, both sides of the ideological spectrum, to go to elected judges. And for reasons that I'm sure we will discuss, I think that would be catastrophic for state government in Tennessee. And I think what this really does, the choice is not between what we have now carrying forward in this. I think the choice is really between giving energy to the notion of moving to an elected appellate judges system, or really taking a system that we have that has worked very well, that is the envy of states that have elected appellate judges, and sort of solidifying it, improving it, putting it in the Constitution, and just making it permanent. I think that's the reason that so many people from so many different parts of the ideological spectrum have become engaged in this issue, and certainly I think the reason that both of us are sitting up here this morning.
Well, then let me follow up. You used the word catastrophic. Some say that the only proper way forward is to go back to electing judges. Why would that be catastrophic? What is different about doing such a thing today versus in 1794?
The problem is that when you have an office, governor, senator, which is public and people they read about what these people do in the newspapers, they can form intelligent opinions about that. That's one thing, and the elective process works very well. When you have 28 or 29 appellate judges, for any of you who are not attorneys in this room who practice, I challenge you to name more than one of those appellate judges here this morning. I mean, I challenge you to name them. What you have is just a whole bunch of names that you don't know anything about on the ballot, which puts it wide open to just Labor's going to come in and try to get its judges, and the Tea Party is going to come in and try to get its judges, and it's just ripe for all sorts of special interest, and especially special interest from outside the state, to pour money into these races with the idea of let's target this one position, let's get a friendly judge in here. And I think you just put the judges in an impossible position. You don't want them out raising anything like the kind of money it takes to run a statewide race. We live in a republic, and one of the things we do is we find ways to give to people the ability to act on our behalf. They don't always have to be elected. And in states, there are there are examples all over the country. I guess West Virginia has been the current sort of poster child for the bad things that happen when you allow individual interests to target individual judges in that way. We don't have it here now. We don't need to start having it.
I think I'd add one thing to that. Ultimately, what we really want, particularly our appellate level judges, we want them to be like a great referee in a game. And when Lipscomb plays Belmont in basketball, they're big rivalries, and they play the Battle of Belmont Boulevard. If you're from Belmont, you really hope that that Lipscomb, the referee underneath his shirt doesn't have on a purple Lipscomb shirt. Now, folks from Lipscomb, hey, that might be great, But in the end, actually, nobody wants that. You really want somebody who's going to call the game like it is. And in the very best world, a appellate level judge is there to call balls and strikes or to say the ball's inbounds or out of bounds, and doesn't bring a partisan ideology or an influence because, hey, I was the business candidate in this election, I'm going to support businesses, or I was the labor candidate, or whatever.
I might just remind us about writing your questions down, because we're not going to be here all morning, and we want to get to your questions, which are much more important than mine. By the way, the nice man changed my mind. Did everybody hear the joke about the bow tie? You heard? Okay. It occurred to me that while the amendment process to our Constitution was on purpose made rather difficult in the beginning, however, the state constitution has been amended several times, by my count 6 times, including a new constitution at least 1 time. The federal constitution, of course, has been amended 27 times. Times change. One of the ways in which times may have changed is the recognition that we have a diverse pool of potential judges. What would you say? I mean, you're the sitting governor, and you will do the appointing.
I think the benefit of having a diverse pool and of selecting our appellate level judges is apparent in this. Let me make one comment before this about how difficult it is to amend the Constitution for really good reason. You don't want a Constitution that you can amend on a whim. And so here what has to happen in Tennessee, one General Assembly has to pass it for it to go on the ballot. Then the next General Assembly actually has to pass it by a 2/3 vote. Then it has to go on the ballot, and even then, it has to get 50% plus 1 of the people who vote in the governor's race. So if you don't vote, if you get down and then say, I don't know how all these amendments work, I'm just not voting, that's a no vote. So the Constitution is deliberately hard to amend, and like I said, I think that's a good thing. But I think in this case, one of your specific question, when you talk about does this help us to have a more or less diverse pool of appellate judges, I would argue from experience it leads to a much more diverse panel, and I would just actually talk real life examples. 2 weeks ago, I was in Memphis to swear in 3 different judges, 2 appellate judges for the Western Court of Appeals and a Supreme Court justice. Those 3, there was an African-American male, a Jewish male, and a white female. And by the way, I had the honor of selecting all of them. I didn't pick any of them because of their backgrounds. They actually are all great jurists, and they will be great jurists. But it helps if you're the person doing the selecting. We have a whole, when we do that, I have a whole graph up there about background and experience and race and sex and other things. And it helps me as I'm looking at it to say, what do we want our entire court to look like? And you have the advantage of doing that. And again, I think if you look at our experience and how the appellate level jurists have been appointed, we've actually done, back to what Governor Bredesen said earlier, it's working.
Now, speaking of the diversity point, thank you. In this recent retention election, there were 3 members of the Tennessee Supreme Court who I believe you appointed. One male, 2 female, and they were retained. That was a pretty, actually a very sizable margin of victory in the retention election. However, that was a fairly mean, nasty exercise that we were all taken through as voters, as citizens. Do you, and yet on the Amendment 2, this is symbolized by the 2 of you sitting here, has gotten some pretty good bipartisan support. Why is that so? I mean, other than...
I think it's just because, I don't think of it as an ideological issue at all. I mean, there is, as the governor pointed out, there's an interest that people have in sort of a fair, down-the-middle adjudication wherever you are on the ideological spectrum. One of the things, I worked a lot when I was governor at business recruiting, and it's interesting, one of the things I found out in that is that companies, Yeah, they need to have some kind of incentives, and they always want them, and that's just part of the ante to get people to talk to you. But in the end, more than anything else, and it was particularly true with Volkswagen down in Chattanooga, what they want is sort of a stable, predictable, fair system. And they want to know that local government and state government, it works. They're not going to come up with some new taxes because they can't balance their budget, 5 years down the line. That they can expect when they have issues that come up, they can expect fair treatment. And I really see this in terms of ensuring that the judiciary has that same kind of neutrality that the governor was talking about, to just call the balls and strikes without thinking about the ideology. I think it really is essential for economic growth as well as fairness in the state, and something that companies really look at very carefully when they're talking about coming into a state.
I would add not just the bipartisan support here, but if you look at it, this is an issue that you have every living governor who supports it. You have the mayor of our 3 largest cities, the mayors of our 4 largest counties, Republicans and Democrats in there. You have the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. You have the NAACP. You have the Beacon Center, which is kind of a conservative think tank group. It is an incredibly wide spectrum of folks who are supporting this, and I think that does speak to its effectiveness.
Well, we have, and remember, any questions, please write yours down, and we'll put those to our guests. There are differences, however, between our state judicial structure and the federal system. One being lifetime appointments to the federal bench. Do you have a thought about that? That's not part of this amendment.
I actually do. I think we have a system that has kind of the best of both worlds, in that the appellate level judges are being appointed and then approved, and then there's the retention elections. A lifetime appointment could be for a very long time. And as Governor Bredesen will tell you, when you have our role of selecting judges, one of the things you look at, quite frankly, is age. If you're going to put some there, I mean, you look at a whole lot of things, but all things being equal, it'd be nice to have somebody who is younger, you think, because they're going to be around for a long time. And that's, by the way, the presidents do the same thing. It's just how that works. It's not the only, I want to be really clear, it's not the only criteria by any means, but it's one of the things you look at. So you could conceivably appoint somebody who was, at an age where they could be around for 30 or 40 years, and maybe to a point where it'd be time to move on, but there'd be nobody to tell them that or to make them do that. And I think the way the check we have in our system of a retention election every 8 years, I think is a very helpful one.
And since both of us have been through this process, I mean, you work real hard at it, and you try to have a good batting average, but it's not perfect. And you're going to, I mean, I certainly did, and I'm sure you will. You'll appoint some people you say, I probably could have done better than that a little ways down the line. And these every 8 years retention election, I think, is really a good protection. It's a way of identifying outliers and provides a process for them to move on, unlike the system the federal government has.
What about the? I guess I would say the politics of the turnout. I mean, this is not a presidential election year. It is a year in which we are voting for governor, our state legislature, our Congress, and so forth. What is your sense of not what the turnout would be, but how people might be urged along to get out and vote?
Well, I obviously would urge people to get out and vote for governor. I think that's a good idea. But I'm concerned a little bit about turnout. Any non-presidential year, and there's not a lot of kind of heat being generated in in many of the political battles. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned that a lot of folks will get to the amendment and just say, I'm not sure I understand all that, I'm going to skip it. And so, as I said before, not voting is a no vote, and for good reasons. That was designed in the Constitution for good reasons, but it's still it's the reality. And I'm actually concerned as a interested political person that turnout might be really low in this vote, and that's one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing.
Yes, and you're not standing for election this year.
Are you?
No,
I'm pretty sure.
as a matter of fact, I should have worn a bow tie this morning. So,
But your sense of is it apathy?
well, look, the thing that concerns me about it is, and I certainly agree with what the governor says about it, as part of the reason I think we're out here, is I think this would get a plurality. I mean, I think it's in good shape in that sense. But the number of people who stopped me on the street or in the store somewhere and said something like, "Now that two that you're with," these are intelligent, informed people who watch the news or read the newspaper. "Now that two you talked about, am I supposed to be for that or against it? Remind me." And that's the kind of stuff that scares you, because people will, when they either do the wrong thing or they'll say, I don't understand this, and so I'm going to pass on to the next one. So I think part of the reason, it's always a little dangerous to do what's happening here, which is you have all of these establishment people saying they're for it, and the public is perfectly capable of saying, well, if all of those establishment people are for it, we're not for it. But to make sure people understand at least that if you agree with or respect the opinions of people like the ones who were up here and the other organizations from the Chamber and the NAACP and everyone else, that the right answer is yes. And just to get that information over. It's very difficult to explain the nuances of this to somebody, so I think the decision is going to be more based on, well, if the two governors are for it, we think it's okay kind of reasoning.
Some would say that, I'll say, elections do have consequences in the sense that we go through these exercises, we elect our governor, we elect our legislature, and then they elect their leadership and so forth from time to time, and that's a proper part of the system. One might also say there may be no perfect system. So of all the imperfect ways this might be done, this has struck me, and I think many, as being the least imperfect. Is that fair?
I think, by the way, I think that's true, period. With any political system that you design, it's going to have its faults and its imperfections. I do think this. I mean, I strongly feel that this is the best way to select our appellate level judges. And I want to go back to what Governor Bredesen started with. This is not. I agree with him. This is not a vote between keeping what we're doing now and what's on the ballot. I think if we don't do that, we've already had a state senator say he will have something in the legislature this year to have popularly elected judges, appellate level judges.
What happens if this does not pass?
Well, technically, I mean, for the time being, nothing. The law stays. We will keep selecting judges the way that we do now. But there will be, I guarantee you, in this session, there will be a move to start the process to have a constitutional amendment to popularly elect appellate judges. Now, that's a long process. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I think that would be the next step.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'd also point out that the system we have now is not enshrined in the Constitution. It's a legislative solution. So the legislature can change it to popularly elected judges. You can just do away with the system that we have, the so-called Tennessee system that we have now. And that's really what we're trying to forestall here, is to say, I mean, remember, people talk about, we don't live in a direct election democracy. We live in a republic. We find ways in which you retain the power, ultimate power in people, but we don't make decisions by giving everybody a box on top of their television set and press what you think about an issue. We make decisions in a different way in this country. And I think a system by which you have these judges who are fairly, anonymous people to most people, selected in the best possible way that we can to get the distribution we want, to get the fairness that we want, to get them out of the position of having to raise large amounts of money and run for office and display their ideological colors all the time. It just, to me, is really a sound elaboration of the process of government that we have in this country and has worked so well for 200 plus years.
Thank you. Now, I think there may be questions from you, and thank you, Chelsea.
throw that one away.
Okay. I meant to say no negative questions. Okay? No, this is not negative. So we'll start with this. We've heard the
But
question.
you should know, because since he wrote the book on it, that's a famous quote from Governor Blanton, who used to start press conference saying, we will have no negative questions today. And, I've never been able to make that work, but
But thanks for the plug.
it's a good book, too.
Question. We've heard you say that with the new system, voters will actually get 3 votes in judicial selection. How so? Who said that? Did you say that? You said that.
So you're going to vote on the governor, who's going to make the selection. You're going to vote on your legislator, who's going to approve that. And then every 8 years, there will be a retention election. So there will be 3 touches into the system, which I think is a pretty good way to have input.
Next question. This is probably deep government here. This is good.
Then if it's too deep, we'll let the Harvard-trained physicist rather than the guy that grew up pumping gas answer it.
All right.
I think I've been insulted, but I'm not sure.
No, just the opposite.
Okay, so they're both comedians. All right. The question, does the proposed amendment do away with the review committee?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It does. I'll throw in one. This is just a personal observation. So right now there's a judicial, or there had been until it sunset, a judicial nominating commission that presented the 3 names to the governor. It was sunset by the legislature. I actually put it back into practice in helping do this just on my own on my own volition. Here's why, and here's why I think other governors will do it. As governor, you probably know 1,000 people who are lawyers, maybe more. And there's probably 500 of those who would like to be an appellate level judge. And it is to be honest, it's a very both helpful and I think good thing to have a group that screens those names before they come to you. And as governor, I don't know that I want to be starting from scratch so that every person that I know who would be very good but comes up and says, hey, by the way, I would love to fill that Western Court of Appeals slot. So if this goes into play, I would keep some sort of nominating commission, and I'm betting other governors would too, just for personal reasons.
Yeah, I'm probably part of the cause the legislature did what it did, because I had some arguments with the Judicial Selection Commission, and we ended up in court over some stuff. That process, I really believe, was flawed in that it took, there was too much politics over there in that process. The issue that I had, by the way, was what they do is they send you 3 names. And 80% of the time, they send you 3 great names, clearly the 3 best qualified. But there were occasions, and there may be people from the selection commission in this room, there were occasions where they wanted somebody, so they would send you 3 names, one of whom was that person, and the other 2 of whom you couldn't possibly appoint under any circumstances. And it was kind of in pushing back against that and fighting that we kind of got into this mess. I agree with the governor, though. I think any governor is going to set up some process by which these names are vetted and so on. You need to get a little distance from that. Someone said once, and I sure discovered it to be true, is that if you have an important appointment to make and there's 10 possibilities, what you end up with is 9 enemies and 1 ingrate. And so that's something where you want to, you want some processes that really vet the names and get you the names and give you a little bit of insulation from the process.
I'm going to write that down. 9 enemies. 1.
The short form of that is don't ever be the judge in a cutest baby contest.
Question next. All right, now here we go. Who are this is like a debate question. Who are the major opponents of Amendment 2 being passed, and what is their argument? Would you try that?
I'll take it first. The major opponents are people, and this is it's a legitimate view, okay, are people who feel like we should be able to popularly elect our judges. The people have the ability and the knowledge to do that and the right to do that, and so we should be able to directly elect our appellate judges. And there are, I think there are 7 states that directly elect appellate levels. Somebody in here might know that number better than I do. A lot of states have different forms, but there are states that do it. Alabama's one, and the people should be able to vote on that. That people feel like they should. You know, we have the same argument about school superintendents, for instance. For the reasons said, I prefer this form, but I think that's the basic argument. And Governor Bredesen, you might.
Yeah, I think, but I mean, don't underestimate. I mean, it is seen by a lot of specialty interests from all sides of the political spectrum as a channel by which you can get things done that you can't get done in the political process by coming in and you know, targeting and putting money behind these individual races. You know, I'd ask you to consider. I mean, we have a federal system. We have a Supreme Court, and everybody, I'm sure, has an opinion about how well it works at any given point in time. Can you imagine what presidential elections would be like if 9 Supreme Court justices were on the ballot at the same? I mean, just think about what that process would be like in this country, and the confusion and the rancor. I mean, all the stuff that would be going on in that. And I think a set of elected Supreme Court judges, you know, federally, I think would be almost unable to do some of the very difficult things that the Supreme Court does. Would Brown versus Board of Education happen with an elected Supreme Court at the time that it did? I'm not sure. So I think, you know, the more you can give these judges some insulation from the sort of day-to-day wash of politics, and let governors deal with that kind of stuff, and let legislators deal with that kind of stuff, the better off we're going to be.
Thank you. Now, we're probably just a minute or so away from adjournment, and so if you got the burning question you haven't written on that card, be sure and hand that over. Next question. How does this process protect judges from special interest and partisan pressures, especially in a political environment like the one at Tennessee's Capitol, where one party has a supermajority and the opportunity and the appointing governor is a member of that same party?
So is the question, say, well, are you getting away from partisan when it's being approved by a supermajority and a governor of the same party? Is that the gist of the question?
Yes.
Well, I guess, again, I'd go back to practical experience. Right now, we have a process that truly does work. I mean, I have a really hard choice. I think I've had the opportunity to select about 27 different judges. Some of those are appellate levels when there's vacancies in trial court levels. At a certain point in time, then the governor gets to appoint those. So of those 27, and this isn't exactly right, 24 or 25 of the times I've had the good kind of hard choice to make, where there has been wow, there are either 2 really good or, in most cases, 3 really good candidates here. I mean, people that he or she could do that job. And I think the result, and like I said, I've seen the people that Governor Bredesen appointed. I think we have people that are not part of the partisan mix. And I think if you looked at any of our Court of Appeals or Court of Criminal Appeals or the Supreme Court, I think you'd have a hard time saying, I've looked at that, the Western Court of Criminal Appeals or the Eastern Court of Appeals, whatever it is, and it has a political bent to it. It's just not happening. And we've had times, right now, obviously, we're in a time with a Republican majority legislature and Republican governor. The history of Tennessee has obviously been, most of the time, it's been just the opposite. It's been and I think, despite all that, I think you'd have a hard time pointing back and saying we've had a political court at any point.
Okay, here's perhaps a follow-on to that. But since the governor is making the appointment, should we still have concerns about special interests that support the governor's party and/or the majority party in the legislature as the nomination and confirmation process proceeds? Should we?
Yeah, I mean, look, you always need to have concerns about what the influence of any sort of group out there is, but a governor is vastly more insulated from those kinds of things than an individual judge would be. I mean, you think about if you run in a statewide election, the last really contested statewide election, I guess that strongly contested out there was the Senate election that Bob Corker was elected in, and they spent $24 million apiece in a contested election like that. It takes a lot of money to run a contested statewide election. Nobody running for judge is going to be able to raise that money in the way that we raised money, which is going out and having fundraisers in people's houses and doing those kinds of things. That is going to be, to make those things, it is going to be big chunks of special interest money that come from somewhere or another that enables those kinds of things to happen. And it's just because they're not as visible. The process by which you raise money is very different. And I think people have to recognize that difference.
Two comments. One, that goes back to Governor Bredesen's. It's an imperfect system, but everything's going to be imperfect. But I'd also say there's one other issue that we really haven't talked about in this, and why in a contested election judges are at a disadvantage. You bring up a case, and so if I'm running against a sitting judge, I can go attack him or her for their ruling on that case. The judge, for very good reasons, can't go into the details of what happened and what ruled there. That we don't want to be retrying that case in the newspapers from 3 years ago, and the judge can't do that. So there is a little difference in a contested election with a jurist versus, I can go argue all day long. Here's why we decided what we, right or wrong. Here's why we decided what to do what we did. A judge can't do that.
Thank you, sir. Both the clock on the wall and Aaron Merrick here, who's helping me not forget the time, indicates that the hour cometh and now is. But I'd like to, for any questions we didn't get to ask, my apologies, but I would like to allow just a moment for each of you if you have a closing comment for us as we depart.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, only to simply say, I think this is, since I left the governor's office, I've done very, very few political things of any sort, and this one certainly tops by an order of magnitude anything else that I've been involved with, because I think it's so important for just the process of the state. It's so important to continue to have in Tennessee the kind of state government that works, that functions, that's admired, that supports the goals of the people in the state. I think this is really important, and I ask everyone in this room to help in any way you possibly can. This is a room full of opinion leaders, and a lot of people will listen to you, and I solicit your help and your support.
First of all, I very much appreciate Governor Bredesen doing this. Like I said, he's beyond the battle now and could be doing whatever he wants this morning. I really appreciate you doing this. Second, I would just end with this, hopefully what you've heard from us. This works. We have an appellate level court system that works in Tennessee right now. And when you have every living governor, all the mayors of major cities and counties, the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, Chief of Police, NAACP, Chamber of Commerce, the Beacon, just when you have all these groups who are involved in the process and say this works, I think it does speak a loud message. And we very much appreciate your being here this morning, and we would appreciate your vote for yes on 2, starting today if you would like.
Let's thank our speakers.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.